The effects of withdrawing high fiber ingredients prior to market on finishing pig growth performance, carcass characteristics, intestinal weights, and carcass fat quality, presented by Kyle Coble. Producers often utilize lower energy, higher fiber diets to reduce the cost of gain and the cost of production. However, one of the negative impacts from feeding a diet that is lower in energy and higher in fiber, such as DDGs or wheat middlings, reduces carcass yield. Previous research has suggested that when we change pigs from a high fiber to a low fiber diet, such as a corn soybean meal based diet, approximately 20 days prior to marketing, this can fully restore that carcass yield. It is the residual digestive contents in the GI tract from feeding the high fiber diet that negatively impacts carcass yield. This results in a lighter carcass than predicted by the final live weight in the barn, which then reduces the producer's revenue. Therefore, more research was needed to determine this optimal time period for switching pigs from the high fiber to the low fiber diet in order to recover carcass yield, improve hot carcass weight, and reduce the negative impacts on carcass fat quality. So the objective of this study was to determine the timing of high fiber ingredient removal from the diet prior to marketing to optimize growth performance, carcass characteristics, primarily the yield, and jowl fat iodine value. Jowl fat iodine value is an industry accepted standard for measuring pork fat quality. 288 pigs with an initial body weight of 38 kilos were used in an 88-day study. These pigs were randomly allotted to one of 6 dietary feeding strategies with 8 pigs per pen and 6 replications per treatment. The dietary strategies consisted of either a controlled diet or a corn soybean meal based diet fed day 0 to day 88, a high fiber diet which contained 30% distillers and 19% wheat middlings fed day 0 to day 88 with no withdrawal period, or the high fiber diet fed until 20, 15, 10, or 5 days prior to slaughter, after which those pigs were switched to the corn soy control. Now these diets were fed in 4 dietary phases and presented to the pigs in the meal form. Here, as we look at the treatment diets for phase 1, 2, 3, and 4, you will see, as mentioned above, we have a corn soybean meal based diet for the low fiber diet, and then the high fiber diet had 30% distillers and 19% wheat middlings, keeping the same consistency of inclusion rate in each subsequent phase throughout the finishing period. Now, as we look at the calculated analysis for these treatments, you will see that, yes, we did balance on SID lysine within each dietary phase, reducing the SID lysine in the subsequent phases. However, we did not balance on dietary energy, such that pigs fed the low fiber diet had a higher metabolizable and net energy for the diet compared to those fed the high fiber diet. Also, the NDF level for the low fiber diet was approximately 9.2%, and for the high fiber diet was approximately 19%, again keeping the same consistency throughout each dietary phase. Pens of pigs and feeders were weighed approximately every 3 weeks to determine the average daily gain, feed intake, and feed efficiency, and during the last 20 days, all pens and feeders were weighed each time a group of pigs were switched diets. At the conclusion of the trial, the second heaviest gilt in each pen was identified and transferred to the K-State Meats Lab for the intestinal data collection portion of this study. The remainder of the pigs were transported to a commercial packing plant for normal data collection and also, in addition, also collecting the jowl fat iodine value. These pigs were individually weighed and tattooed on day 88 prior to transportation to allow carcass yield to be calculated on an individual basis. Carcass yield is calculated by taking the hot carcass weight and dividing that by the live weight at the farm approximately 12 hours prior to slaughter. Gilts selected for harvest at K-State were randomly assigned to a slaughter order and were withdrawn from feed for 12 hours prior to slaughter. A 12-hour feed withdrawal is a very common time period and a very well representation of the withdrawal time that would be very similar to that in the commercial world. Immediately after evisceration, the entire pluck was weighed, as well as the individual organs, which included the stomach, the small intestine, the cecum, and the large intestine. The stomach, the cecum, and the large intestine were weighed both full of the intestinal contents and then again after they were stripped and rinsed. To do this, the digestive was manually removed from each individual organ, thoroughly rinsing the digestive contents in each one, and then ensuring that the excess water used to clean the tissue was cleared before weighing the individual organ again to ensure that indeed it was only the tissue that we were weighing again and not either water or residual digestive contents that we missed in the cleaning process. Now lastly, as we were all familiar with bacon and its popularity in the food sector today, we were also interested in looking at the belly quality of these pigs fed these different withdrawal strategies and diets. Therefore, belly quality measurements were collected from bellies cut from the left side of each carcass, and we performed a belly flop test on each one of those. Here are a few pictures to illustrate the process again of collecting the organs and doing the intestinal work. Here we have the collecting the organs and identifying each individual one, and then tying those off and segregating those to ensure we don't have any leakage of digestive contents, and then manually stripping those contents to remove, and then also thoroughly cleaning those with water to ensure that, yes, again, we are just weighing only the tissue. The data was analyzed using the mixed procedure of SAS, and PIN served as our experimental unit, and the pre-planned contrasts used to compare these responses were between the corn-soy control versus the high fiber, as well as linear and quadratic contrasts for the high fiber diet withdrawal time. These results were considered significant at p less than 0.05 and a tendency between 0.05 and 0.1. I'd like to take just a brief second here to set up the results slides. Here we have the response criteria on the vertical axis and the dietary treatments and withdrawal strategies on the horizontal axis, and the yellow bar is the corn-soy diet, and the dark red bar is the high fiber diet fed completely throughout the finishing period or a 0 withdrawal time, and the intermediate bars are signifying that these pigs would have been fed the high fiber diet until 5 days prior to slaughter, 10 days, 15, or 20 days prior to slaughter, after which these pigs were switched to the corn-soy diet. And then we have the statistical analysis in the top right-hand corner. For average daily gain overall, there is no difference between the corn-soy or the high fiber or the withdrawal strategies, such that average daily gain ranged from 0.98 to 1 kilogram per day. However, as we look at feed intake, there was a tendency for pigs fed the high fiber diet to have a higher feed intake than those fed the corn-soy diet. However, withdrawal strategy had no further impact on feed intake. Now, as you will remember, the pigs fed the high fiber diet had a diet that was lower in energy, so it's not surprising that these pigs were less efficient than those fed the higher energy corn-soy diet. However, withdrawal strategy had no further impact on feed efficiency. Now, you will remember that there was no difference in average daily gain between either the corn-soy control or the high fiber diet or the withdrawal strategies. So it's not surprising again here that we yet again don't see a difference in final live weight, such that the final live weight ranges from approximately 125 to 126 kilos. Now, the most important response for this study was the Carcass Yield, and you will see here that it's very clear in such that pigs fed the high fiber diet had a 1.5% reduction in carcass yield compared to those fed the corn-soy. And there's a quadratic response such that pigs withdrawn from the high fiber diet approximately 15 to 20 days prior to slaughter had carcass yields that were very similar to those fed the corn-soy control. Now, although not statistically significant, hot carcass weight follows a similar numerical pattern to that of the carcass yield. Now, as mentioned before, jowl fat iodine value is an industry-accepted standard for measuring pork fat quality. These values signify the amount of unsaturated fat that are in the carcass fat. A lower value would signify less unsaturated fat compared to a higher value that would signify a higher amount of unsaturated fat. Pigs fed the high fiber diet had a much higher Jowl IV compared to those fed the corn soy. And this would be due to the fact that we'd used DDGs and wheat middlings as our fiber sources in these diets. And it would be the fat content in the DDGs that would be contributing to this increase in Jowl fat iodine value. Now, there is a linear reduction in Jowl fat iodine value as we withdraw pigs from the high fiber diet. However, 20 days was not enough to reduce Jowl fat IV to that similar to that of the corn soy control. As we talk about level of unsaturated fat in the carcass, this can also have a negative impact on belly firmness. Now, we measure belly firmness by resting a belly upon a centered fulcrum point and measuring the ends between the bellies once it is draped over and been allowed to rest for approximately 1 minute. It's not surprising that pigs fed the high fiber diet with more unsaturated fat have less firm bellies when compared to those fed the corn soy control. However, withdrawal strategy had no further impact on belly firmness. As we get into the intestinal portion of this study, there's a significant increase in whole GI tract weight for pigs fed the high fiber diet compared to those fed the corn soy. And there's a tendency for a linear reduction in whole GI tract weight as we withdraw pigs from the high fiber diet up to 20 days. Now, you will remember we withdraw these pigs from the high fiber diet for 12 hours prior to slaughter. And based on normal passage rate, it's not surprising that here we do not see a difference in full stomach weight between either dietary treatments or withdrawal strategy. However, as we look at the full large intestinal weight, there is again a clear difference in weight such that pigs fed the high fiber diet had a 1.2 kilogram increase in full large intestinal weight compared to those fed the corn soy. And there was again a linear reduction in full large intestinal weight as we withdraw pigs from the high fiber diet and switch them to the corn soy control. We can conclude that it is only the residual digestive contents left in the GI tract that is contributing to this weight, as here we see no difference between the corn soy and the high fiber diet or withdrawal strategies for the rinsed large intestinal weight. So in conclusion, withdrawing pigs from the high fiber diet and switching to the corn soy control diet did restore carcass yield when done at least 15 days prior to harvest. And pigs fed the high fiber diet throughout had 1.2 kilogram more digestive contents remaining in the large intestine than that of the corn soy control. And as few as 5 days withdrawal from the high fiber diet reduced the full large intestinal weight by nearly 1 kilogram. Now, Jowl fat iodine value was higher in pigs fed the high fiber diet, but as withdrawal period increased, that value did improve. Pigs fed the high fiber diet throughout also had softer bellies, but withdrawal strategy did not have an impact here on belly firmness. And it is important to note again that these effects were influenced by the unsaturated fat content in the DDGs and wheat middlings. So the take-home message from this presentation is that this study confirms that the high fiber diets do have a negative impact on carcass yield and should be withdrawn from finishing pig diets at least 15 days prior to slaughter. And in periods of high corn and soybean meal prices, this withdrawal strategy will allow a producer to utilize a lower cost, lower energy diet through the majority of the finishing phase without having the negative impacts on carcass yield in reducing the producer's profitability. I would like to thank Kansas State, the graduate students for their help, and the National Pork Board for funding this project. Thank you.